I hadn't expected much that afternoon. My friend had invited me over, nothing more than a casual visit to kill a lazy Saturday. I thought it would be the usual, video games in his room, some loud music, maybe a pizza order by evening. What I didn't realize was that stepping through his front door would change the way I looked at people, at connection, maybe even at myself. She appeared in the hallway as though she belonged to the house in a way no one else did. My friend introduced her casually, as if she were just another family member. "That's my aunt," he said, barely looking up. But I couldn't stop staring. She was around 42, with a calm composure that made her presence both grounding and electrifying. Her hair was tied back loosely, a few strands falling free as if the day had been long. She wore something simple, a light blouse, faded jeans, but somehow it looked elegant on her, almost regal in its effortlessness. Her voice was the first thing that caught me off guard. Low, steady, tinged with warmth that wasn't forced. She didn't rush her words like most people do. Instead, she let silence linger just long enough to make you lean in, as if what she had to say deserved weight. When her eyes found mine, I felt that uncomfortable yet thrilling sensation of being studied, not judged, but seen. She smiled faintly, her lips curling as though she'd caught me thinking something I shouldn't. "You look too serious for your age," she teased, her tone playful but her gaze unwavering. I tried to laugh it off, but my throat felt tight. I wasn't used to women looking at me that way, older, confident, almost amused by my discomfort. The house felt suddenly alive with small details I would never have noticed before. The faint aroma of tea drifted from the kitchen, mixing with the soft hum of an air conditioner. The wooden floor creaked under her slow steps as she passed by, and even that sound lodged itself in my memory. She carried a faint perfume, something floral yet grounded, and it lingered in the air even after she moved out of sight. I told myself not to overthink it. She was just my friend's aunt, nothing more. And yet, as she disappeared into the kitchen, I found myself watching the empty space she left behind, my chest tightening with an unexplainable curiosity. Something told me this visit was going to be far from ordinary. Later that afternoon, the house seemed busier, my friends shouting from the living room, music faintly playing in the background, footsteps up and down the hallway. But somehow, the kitchen became its own world. I'd wandered in to grab a glass of water, expecting nothing more than a few seconds of quiet. Instead, she was there, leaning against the counter with her sleeves pushed up, drying a teacup slowly with a towel. She glanced over her shoulder when I entered, her eyes catching mine with that same unsettling steadiness as before. "Thirsty?" she asked softly, as though the simple word carried more weight than it should. I nodded, fumbling with the glass, filling it at the sink while acutely aware of her presence just a few feet away. The air felt different in that small space, warmer, closer. "Your friend tells me you're studying, what was it again?" she asked, placing the teacup on the counter and folding the towel neatly, every gesture calm and deliberate. "Design," I replied, my voice more tentative than I'd meant it to be. "Graphic design, actually." Her lips curved slightly, not a full smile but enough to feel like approval. "Ambitious," she said. "I like that. Do you know how rare it is for someone your age to sound like they actually believe in their own path?" The words landed heavier than I expected. Most people, especially older ones, either dismissed my dreams or offered advice that felt more like correction. But she listened as if what I said mattered. She didn't treat my goals as fleeting or naive, she looked at me like she believed I might actually achieve them. As we talked, I noticed the little details that carved the moment into memory. The faint clink of glasses as I set mine down. The way her hand rested on the counter, just inches from mine, steady and elegant. The soft reflection of sunlight through the window, catching in her hair and turning it to strands of bronze. At one point, she leaned just slightly closer, brushing a strand of loose hair back behind her ear. The movement was casual, unthinking, but I felt the heat of her nearness, the air between us carrying a tension I couldn't name. When my friend called out from the other room, the spell broke, but not completely. She gave me a small nod, her expression unreadable, as if she knew something I didn't. And as I walked back to the noise of the living room, I realized my thoughts weren't on the games or laughter, they were still in that kitchen, replaying every word she'd spoken. By late afternoon, the house had grown louder, filled with voices, the television, and the clatter of dishes being cleared away. My friend and I had been asked to help move a few boxes from the garage into the back room, and I didn't think much of it. The boxes weren't especially heavy, but they were awkward, and my friend disappeared halfway through to take a phone call, leaving me to finish the job. I bent down, lifting one of the heavier cartons, when I felt her presence before I saw her. She stood at the doorway, leaning lightly against the frame, her arms crossed as though she'd been quietly watching for some time. Her gaze followed me with an unreadable calm, the corners of her mouth twitching upward in what looked almost like amusement. "You know," she said at last, her voice cutting through the silence, "you're stronger than your uncle ever was." The words startled me more than they should have. I froze, the box in my arms suddenly feeling weightless compared to the rush of heat that climbed into my chest. I turned toward her, not sure if she was teasing or if she meant it as genuine praise. But then she did something unexpected, something small, yet it knocked the air from my lungs. She winked. Not the careless, playful kind you throw to lighten a moment, but a slow, deliberate gesture, followed by the faintest curve of her lips. It was mischievous, yes, but also strangely intimate, as if she had shared a secret with me and me alone. I tried to laugh, though it came out strained. "I'll take that as a compliment," I managed, though my throat felt dry. Her eyes lingered on mine, steady and unhurried. "You should," she replied simply, her tone carrying that same quiet authority I had begun to associate with her. And then she stepped away, leaving me with the echo of her words and the image of that wink seared into my mind. The room seemed impossibly empty once she was gone. I set the box down, my palms damp, my heart beat far too loud for such a simple exchange. It wasn't just what she'd said, it was the way she'd said it, the subtle weight behind her words, as though she saw strength in me no one else had bothered to notice. And in that fleeting moment, the boundary between admiration and attraction blurred in ways I wasn't ready to admit aloud. That evening, after the noise of the house had faded into the hum of the television and the clinking of plates being washed, I stepped outside to breathe. The veranda stretched along the side of the house, overlooking a garden that was half lit by a single porch lamp. The night air was cooler than I expected, tinged with the faint scent of jasmine drifting up from the flower beds. I leaned against the wooden railing, my fingers tracing the rough grain, trying to steady the strange restlessness her presence had stirred in me all day. The screen door creaked softly, and I turned to see her stepping out, a light cardigan draped over her shoulders. She didn't speak right away, just came to stand beside me, her hands resting lightly on the railing. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was charged, as though words would only break something fragile that had been building since morning. Finally, she sighed, her gaze fixed on the garden below. "People think I'm strong," she said, her voice low, thoughtful. "The one who always knows what to do. But the truth is, sometimes I feel tired of holding everything together." I didn't interrupt. There was something about the honesty in her tone that demanded nothing but listening. She turned her head slightly, and in the half-light, I saw the faint vulnerability in her expression, like a glimpse behind a curtain she rarely allowed anyone to peek through. "You ever feel like life expects more of you than you're ready to give?" she asked. "All the time," I admitted quietly, my chest tightening. "Like I'm running to catch up with a version of myself that doesn't even exist yet." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, not mocking, but understanding. That was the moment I realized, despite the years between us, she and I shared the same unspoken weight of expectations, the same loneliness of being misunderstood. Our hands brushed on the railing, so light it might have been accidental. But neither of us pulled away. The contact was subtle, the warmth of her skin against mine sending a quiet current through my body. I felt her shift just slightly closer, the fabric of her cardigan grazing my arm, and my breath caught. For a long moment, we said nothing. Just stood there, two people of different worlds, bound together by a silence that felt more intimate than words could ever be. When she finally looked at me, her eyes held something unspoken, something that left me wondering if she felt the same tension I did, or if I was simply imagining it all. Either way, the night had changed everything. The storm came suddenly, as if the night itself had been holding its breath until it could no longer keep still. One sharp crack of thunder rattled the window panes, and the rain followed in sheets, drumming against the roof with a force that silenced everything else. The house went dark a few minutes later, the power gone in a single blink, leaving only startled laughter and hurried footsteps as candles were lit in different rooms. I found myself in the sitting room, the glow of 2 candles casting soft halos of gold against the walls. She was already there, seated on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap, her face illuminated in the flickering light. Shadows danced across her features, softening her into something almost otherworldly, youthful and timeless at once. "Storms like this," she said quietly, glancing toward the rain-slicked window, "used to frighten me when I was little. Now, I almost find them comforting. Like the world is reminding us how small we are." Her voice carried easily in the hush of the storm, and I moved closer, drawn in by the calm steadiness of her tone. When I sat down beside her, the couch dipped slightly, and our knees nearly brushed. She shifted, not away but toward me, a small motion that made my pulse quicken. A blanket had been thrown across the armrest, and without thinking, I reached for it. "Here," I said softly, spreading it over both of us. She gave me a look, half amusement, half something gentler, and accepted the gesture without a word. The fabric was warm, smelling faintly of cedar and her perfume. As the minutes passed, our shoulders pressed together beneath the shared weight of the blanket. It was the smallest point of contact, yet it anchored me, made the rest of the world fall away. Each clap of thunder outside seemed to echo the beat of my heart. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was alive with unspoken things. She glanced at me once, her face turned so close I could see the faintest lines by her eyes, the quiet history written there. Candlelight flickered across her cheek, catching the bronze in her hair. "You're different," she murmured suddenly, her eyes still fixed on the flame. "Different how?" I asked, my voice lower than I'd intended. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, more like a secret she was considering whether to share. "Most young men I meet, they're restless, distracted. But you listen. You carry yourself as if you already know who you are. That's rare." Her words sank into me with a warmth that spread deeper than the blanket ever could. For a moment, neither of us moved. The storm raged outside, wild and relentless, but here in the glow of the candle, there was only her presence, steady and disarming. Our shoulders pressed a little more firmly together, and I didn't dare shift. That closeness, subtle as it was, felt like stepping across a threshold I hadn't known was there. And though neither of us said it aloud, the air between us hummed with the quiet, undeniable truth: something had begun, and neither of us could pretend otherwise. The storm lingered long into the night, refusing to soften. The rain lashed against the windows in steady waves, and every so often thunder cracked like a warning in the distance. The candles flickered, bending shadows across the walls, painting everything in restless gold. I hadn't moved from the couch, and neither had she. The blanket still covered us both, though now it felt like more than warmth, it felt like a quiet pact, as if we were choosing to stay in this small universe together for as long as the storm would allow. Her hand rested lightly on her knee, fingers curled inwards, still. I found myself stealing glances, watching how delicate yet certain her hands looked, as if they belonged to someone who'd built and rebuilt her life more times than she'd admit. My shoulder still pressed against hers, but now I could feel the subtle rise and fall of her breathing, calm on the surface but uneven underneath. She was the first to break the silence. Her voice came low, almost hesitant. "I didn't expect this," she said, her eyes still fixed on the candle flame. "Didn't expect what?" I asked, though I already felt the answer somewhere deep in my chest. Her lips pressed together before she exhaled slowly. "To feel this. With someone younger." Her words trailed off, but the honesty in them filled the room more powerfully than thunder ever could. I could hear the conflict in her tone, strong yet uncertain, as if she were weighing whether her admission was a mistake. I leaned in slightly, not to push but to let her know I was listening, fully present. "I don't see you as older," I said quietly. "I just see you." Her eyes flicked toward me then, searching, testing whether I meant it. And in that pause, I let myself be as open as I had ever been. "You make me want to slow down," I continued. "To notice things. To listen. To be better." Her breath caught, just barely audible, but enough to tell me my words had landed. Then, without ceremony, her fingers shifted. They brushed against mine where my hand rested at my side. The contact was feather-light at first, uncertain, but when I didn't move, she allowed her hand to settle fully against mine. The sensation was electric in its simplicity. Her skin was warm, her touch deliberate. When her fingers finally intertwined with mine, it wasn't bold, it was careful, tentative, like a door opening after years of being locked. I held my breath, afraid to break the spell, yet the longer we sat there, the steadier the silence became. The storm outside faded into background noise, and all I could hear was the quiet rhythm of her breathing syncing with mine. Her thumb traced once, lightly, across the back of my hand. It was the smallest gesture, but it said everything words couldn't, that she felt it too, that this closeness wasn't an accident, that whatever lines had once existed between us had now blurred beyond recognition. For the first time all night, I allowed myself to squeeze her hand back, not too tightly, but enough to let her know I wasn't going anywhere. And in that shared grip, in that fragile, perfect moment, the world outside ceased to matter. By dawn, the storm had passed. I woke to the muted sound of rain dripping from the gutters and the soft gray light of morning pushing its way through the curtains. The house was still quiet, heavy with the kind of calm that follows a restless night. I sat up slowly, the blanket sliding from my shoulders, and for a moment I wondered if everything that had happened, her words, her hand in mine, had been some kind of dream woven out of candlelight and thunder. But then I caught the faint sound of movement from the kitchen, the clink of porcelain against wood, and I knew she was awake. Drawn by something I couldn't quite name, I rose and followed the sound. She was standing at the counter, pouring tea into 2 cups. Morning light spilled across her face, softening her features, illuminating the delicate curve of her cheek and the faint strands of hair that had fallen loose overnight. She looked different in the daylight, not less striking, but gentler, as though the armor she wore around others had been quietly set aside. When she saw me, she didn't startle. She simply held my gaze for a long moment before offering the faintest smile. "Good morning," she said softly, sliding one of the cups across the table toward me. I sat opposite her, the wooden chair cool beneath me. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just let the warmth of the tea and the weight of the silence hold us. Her fingers brushed mine as she pushed the cup closer, deliberate enough to be noticed, fleeting enough to leave me wondering if it was intentional. "You slept?" she asked at last, her voice casual, though her eyes betrayed the same question that lingered in my own mind: what happens now? "A little," I admitted. "Though, my thoughts were busy." Her lips curved, a knowing expression settling there. "Mine too." She cradled her cup with both hands, her gaze dropping to the steam rising between us. For a moment, she looked almost shy, so different from the composed, confident woman who had teased me only yesterday. I wanted to say something then, something to capture the weight of what had shifted between us. But no word seemed right. Instead, I let the silence speak, let my hand drift across the table until it rested lightly over hers. She didn't pull away. If anything, her hand turned slightly, allowing my fingers to settle against her skin, as though the gesture had been waiting to happen. The house slowly came alive in the distance, the sound of doors opening, voices beginning to stir, but in that small circle of light and warmth, it felt like we existed in our own world. She lifted her eyes at last, steady and deliberate, and there was no wink this time, no teasing remark. Just a look that said more than words could carry. It told me she saw me, not as her nephew's friend, not as someone too young, but as a man who had stood quietly beside her when she'd allowed herself to be vulnerable. And though nothing grand was spoken, the truth was there, undeniable. Something between us had begun, and even in the clear light of morning, neither of us wished to take it back.